The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 28th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This and all subsequent webinars will be available on makara.us under the subheading Moria Federation Webinars. Okay, as is our habit, we'll start by checking in on HPB's travels in India, as described in old diary leaves by Colonel Olcott. Last month, our duo had returned to Ceylon to speak to thousands of enthusiastic Buddhist followers. This month, we'll read a story about the generosity of an impoverished Sinhalese woman. This will be two readers. Can we go ahead and assign those?
Okay, I'm going to start, and then Michael S., if you will pick up after me, please.
That sounds good. Go ahead.
Okay, creating a Sinhalese Buddhist fund. A touching case of generosity was reported to me one evening, just before a branch meeting. While the committee were haranguing some householders in a certain street, a tired-looking woman, miserably clad, was seen to be listening with rapt attention. Presently, she turned away and entered a house, from which she soon reappeared, and approaching the committee, she handed them a single rupee for the fund. Bashfully, she said that she had gained her livelihood by grinding rice for another poor woman who sold appas, this species of girdle cakes I've mentioned above. Her husband, a cartman, was laid up and unable to work. She had been saving up coppers of the smallest denomination during the last 6 months to buy herself a decent cloth. But she felt it was much better for her to help this noble object of the fund than to keep the money for herself. She would wear her old garment another half year.
Michael?
In the course of the evening, I addressed the branch about this modern instance of the widow's mite and said, "Gentlemen, this poor woman has earned her good karma by her pious deeds. Now let us earn the same by relieving her distress." I threw a rupee on the floor and invited others to do the same. 30 rupees were soon gathered, and I bade the committee find the woman and give her the sum. Some time after that, I had her brought to Vidyodaya College to a lecture of mine and asked her to sit near the platform on which were gathered the high priest and many other monks. In appealing to the large audience for funds, I said that certain gentlemen, naming them, had given 500, 250, 100, and other sums of rupees out of their abundance. But I would now show them a person who had given more than them all combined. Then I told the story and called the woman on to the platform. She was greeted with thunders of applause, and we got a large subscription that day for the educational purposes.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, last month, we finished up verse 10, which reads, "Father, mother, spin a web, whose upper end is fastened to spirit, the light of the one darkness, and the lower one to its shadowy end, matter. And this web is the universe spun out of the two substances made in one, which is Svabhavat." So, to review, verse 10 is key because it marks that point when, in any given evolutional cycle, spirit and matter unite, when all forms of consciousness become units of spirit-infused matter, the outer garment of what is called in the SD Svabhavat. Actually, the message of the entire verse can be found in the first two words, father, mother. This is the second aspect of deity, which HPB calls the fiery ether, or akasha. Anybody have any thoughts or questions about this verse before we move on to verse 11? Alrighty then, on to verse 11. Can we get a reader for this verse, please?
Hi, Lynn. Can you read that for us, please?
Yes. It, the web, expands when the breath of fire, the Father, is upon it. It contracts when the breath of the Mother, the root of matter, touches it. Then the sons, the elements with their respective powers or intelligences, disassociate and scatter to return into their mother's bosom at the end of the great day and re-become one with her. When it, the web, is cooling, it becomes radiant. Its sons expand and contract through their own selves and hearts. They embrace infinitude.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, let's take a look at the commentary. Can we get a reader for this, please? Just below the verse. I always put the verse in blue, and that doesn't have to be reread every time, but just read the black print.
Martha, can you read that?
Sure. The expanding of the universe under the breath of fire is very suggestive in the light of the fire mist period, of which modern science speaks so much and knows in reality so little. Great heat breaks up the compound elements and resolves the heavenly bodies into their primeval one element, explains the commentary. Once disintegrated into its primal constituent by getting within the attraction and reach of a focus, or center of heat energy, of which many are carried about to and fro in space, a body, whether alive or dead, will be vaporized and held in the bosom of the mother until Fohat, gathering a few of the clusters of cosmic matter, nebulae, will, by giving it an impulse, set in motion anew, develop the required heat, and then leave it to follow its own new growth.
Thank you, Martha. Any thoughts or questions about this commentary? Here, HPB, as she has in the past, attempts to reconcile physical plane physics with occult physics. Apparently, fire mist interacting with cosmic dust was an idea popular among 19th century astronomers, an idea that forms no part of modern astronomy, at least nothing I could find has this idea extant. Occultly, this fire mist is akasha, the livingness of the one element in its second stage as Father-Mother, also described in traditional theosophy as divine astral light. And if you remember, astral has very different parameters than it does in our modern theosophy, the astral plane. This is followed by a description of the cycles of disintegration through heat and reconstitution through Fohat, of a, quote, body, which we can take to mean the form aspect of some unit of consciousness. Mysterious and given without further explanation is this statement regarding the centers of energy that apparently disintegrate these bodies into their primal constituents. The fact that they are carried about, quote, to and fro in space is a bit puzzling, suggesting that these dissociating energy centers are other than solar or planetary loci. If anybody has any insights into what these centers of dissociating energy that are cast about to and fro in space might be, I'd be interested in what you have to say about that. Very mysterious. Maybe I'm missing something obvious, but I couldn't figure out what that could be. So, any thoughts or questions about anything so far?
Yes, Jonathan has his hand up.
Yes.
Go ahead. You're self-muted, Jonathan. There you go.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, I just love all this.
Great.
You know, if I could relate this to my own parents, and I want to say that my mother is a very passionate woman, and I love that word passion. For her, my experience through our communications, she really has a fire about her, something that sparks something inside of me. And just by looking at that word passion, there is the sound of ashes in that. And that's what it says to me. She is my birthplace. And my father, you know, relating to him as well, which today is also a special day. It's his birthday. My father passed away last year. I do not have him with me. My mother does not have him with me. But we share something, a big learning experience from his life and his passions as well. And that's what keeps us going. It's something that will never die and never burn out. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks for sharing, Jonathan. So, any thoughts or questions about the commentary so far?
Lynn said,
go ahead.
She says, could that refer to black holes?
What? Specific? Oh, you mean the well, you know, that's an interesting idea. Of course, black holes were unknown at the time of the writing of this. So, you know, but I don't think that precludes the possibility in and of itself. It's certainly some type of first-rate disintegrative center, you know, and at least apparently, from what we've been able to observe about black holes thus far, they seem to be that. Of course, we don't know what happens when matter is pulled into a hole. It's certainly translated into some form of energy that is beyond material, but other than that, we don't know. But so, yes, possibly. It's certainly, you know, out of all the things in space, it seems to be the best candidate for it. So, good idea. Okay, let's see. Up next. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Okay, hold on just 1 second. Britta says center equals chakra and thus the rotation.
Mm-hmm. So this is the comment on, okay. Center each, and thus the rotation. Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Antonella, can you read that for us, please?
From the expanding?
Yeah, starting at the expanding, right.
Okay. The expanding and contracting of the web, i.e. the word stuff or atoms, expresses here the pulsatory movement, for it is the regular contraction and expansion of the infinite and shoreless ocean of that which we may call the noumenon of matter, emanated by Bhavavat, which causes the universal vibration of atoms. But it is also suggestive of something else. It shows that the ancients were acquainted with that, which is now the puzzle of many scientists and especially of astronomers. The cause of the first ignition of matter or the word stuff, the paradox of the heat produced by the refrigerative contraction and other such cosmic riddles. For it points unmistakably to a knowledge by the ancients of such phenomena.
So any thoughts or questions about this? So, noumenal matter emanated by Svabhavat, or father-mother, cyclically pulses, contracting or expanding according to whether it is an involutional or evolutional cycle. Thus, it is either responding to the heat of the one fiery germ, sweeping it into form by Fohat, or on the evolutionary cycle, to the cool, homogeneous radiance of the Great Mother, which dissociates its form aspect. In a treatise on cosmic fire, in the column on the left, DK cites an old commentary which addresses this expanding and contracting process as it plays out in this solar system. In the column on the right are definitions of the fire devas cited in this old commentary. So if we could get a reader to read Roman numeral 1 on the left, followed by number 1 on the right, which describes the entity described in the old commentary, and then move on to number 2 on the left, number 2 on the right, etc.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. He who transfers the Father's life to the lower three seeketh the agency of fire, hid in the heart of Mother. He worketh with the Agnachaitans that hide, that burn, and thus produce the needed moisture. Number 1, the Agnachaitans, a high grade of fire spirit, are the devas who construct and build in matter of the densest kind in connection with logoic manifestation. They function on the 7th subplane of the cosmic physical plane.
Now, hold on a sec, Scott. I'm thinking that if you look at this cosmically, because this is, this is DK, so it's specific to our system, but you never know in the Secret Doctrine. Overall, I think it's also systemic, but it seems to have a lot of cosmic orientation. So if you looked at it as this whole process that's being described here by DK, you could see that 7th cosmic physical plane as in its entirety. Instead of the 7th subplane of the cosmic physical plane, it would be just the cosmic physical plane looked at cosmically. Anyway, go ahead.
You want me to continue? I was going to say that it's interesting that the Agnichaitans, according to the left, hide, burn, and thus produce the needed moisture, as if it's building up into the 6th subplane, like an astral.
Yeah, and yes, that is interesting.
Or coming, there's the fire-water alternation there.
Yeah.
You want to continue with number 2?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. He who transfers the life from out the lower 3 into the ready 4th seeketh the agency of fire hid in the heart of Brahma. He worketh with the forces of the Agnishvatas that emanate, that blend, and thus produce the needed warmth. 2, the Agnishvatas, the solar angels, are the builders on the 5th or gaseous subplane of the cosmic physical, and from the human standpoint, are the most profoundly important, for they are the builders of the body of consciousness per se. From the psychic standpoint of occult physiology, they have a close connection with the physical brain, the seat or empire of the thinker. Number 3, he who transfers the light into the gathering 5th seeketh the agency of fire hid in the heart of Vishnu. He worketh with the forces of the Agnishoryans that blaze, that liberate the essence, and thus produce the needed radiance. 3, the Agnishoryans, the fire essence of Buddhi, are the builders on the 6th subplane of the cosmic physical plane.
There you go.
Our systemic astral plane. Right. They represent, as I have before hinted, the sympathetic nervous system in the logoic physical body, just as the brothers of the seventh vibration represent the sum total of the circulatory or blood system. 4. First moisture, slow and all-enveloping. Then heat, with the ever-growing warmth and fierce intensity. Then force that presses, drives, and concentrates. Thus is radiance produced. Thus the exudation, thus mutation, thus change of form. Finally, liberation, escape of the volatile essence and the gathering of the residue back to primordial stuff.
Thanks. Thanks, Scott. So any thoughts or questions? This is fascinating material in my mind. Roman numerals 1 describes the involutional cycle. Roman numerals 2 and 3, the evolutional, and then 4 summarizes the entire process in terms of moisture, heat, and radiance. Sort of midway through number 4, you see it there, it says, then force that presses, drives, and concentrates, and then we turn. Then it turns. Thus is radiance produced, and that starts the evolutional process. So, and of course, leading to liberation through release of the, quote, volatile essence. So, yeah, any further thoughts, ideas about this process of coming into form and escaping from it?
Okay, Jonathan's got his hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi.
There you go.
What happens when you take all this in? What is the release? I'm really thinking about tears here, of what we create from emotions.
Well, Jonathan, I'll address your question the best I can. Study actually helps to, study and meditation and service help you to realize that the emotional plane is a glamour, is illusory by nature. And you realize that it is not the source of your being. And it actually helps you to move beyond that. I mean, clearly that you're processing right now on that level. And, my sympathy goes out to you for that. But it's a long process of reorientation from, the hypnosis of the lower emotional nature and lifting onto the mental plane so that you can contact the light of the soul. And that is in every way your saving process. So, okay, we can't really have a discussion at this level right now. These webinars aren't really personal, even though my heart goes out to you. So let's get back to this SD. And I have to warn you, this is a kind of convoluted paragraph. Once in a while, HPB goes into this mode. So while this is being read, don't worry about these convoluted references to 19th century science so much. Just focus on the esoteric content. So could we get a reader for this? Jonathan, are you still there?
Oops. Here, let me get him. Let me unmute him again. There you go.
Yes, I am still here. Yes.
Great. Would you mind reading this for us?
At the top.
No, actually, we'll skip the verse part and just go to where the black print is.
Yes, and Thank you for letting me read and waiting.
My pleasure, and thank you.
There is heat internal and heat external in every atom. Say the manuscript commentaries to which the writer has had access, the breath of the Father or Spirit, and the breath or heat of the Mother, matter. And they give explanations which show that the modern theory of extinction of the solar fires by loss of heat through radiation is erroneous. The assumption is false even in the scientist's own admission. For as Professor Newcomb points out, by losing heat, a gaseous body contracts, and the heat generated by the contraction exceeds that which it had to lose in order to produce the contraction. This paradox, that a body gets hotter as the shrinking produced by its getting colder is greater, led to long disputes. The surplus of heat, it was argued, was lost by radiation, and to assume that the temperature is not lowered pari passu with a decrease of volume under a constant pressure is to set at naught the law of Charles. Nebular theory, Winchell. Contraction develops heat, it is true, but contraction from cooling is incapable of developing the whole amount of heat at any time existing in the mass, or even maintaining a body at a constant temperature, etc. Professor Winchell tries to reconcile the paradox only in seeming one fact, as Homer Lane's proved by suggesting something besides heat. May it not be, he asked. Simply a repulsion among the molecules, which varies according to some law of distance. But even this will be found irreconcilable unless this something besides heat is ticketed. Causeless heat, the breath of fire, and all creative force plus absolute intelligence, which physical science is not likely to accept. However, it may be the reading of this stanza shows it, notwithstanding its archaic phraseology, to be more scientific than even modern science.
Thanks, Jonathan. Well read. So any thoughts or questions? I had to read this 4 or 5 times before I started to get some sense of cohesion. Yeah, somebody?
Martha has her hand up. Martha, you're self-muted. Go ahead.
Great, Martha, would you explain this paragraph to me, please?
I think I'm trying to slow us all down so that we get the chance to read it 5 or 6 times before we get it. But so
we'll go through it.
What I'm curious about is, in thinking in my unknowing state, what is Blavatsky after? And I think it's consciousness. I think what she's trying to do, so I think you can help me with that part. I think what she's trying to do is to find the motion in what produces consciousness. I think the challenge for us is that it all sounds so physical, when in fact the idea might be to go back to the more esoteric principles of motion and rhythm and that kind of stuff. And that what comes to mind for me, and this is probably out of my inability to quite grasp this, is the notion of there is no separation. There's only this exchange of forms, which perhaps what she is interested in is in getting us to use the current scientific knowledge at that time to come to a sense of what mind is, which is this continual flux between just closeness, distance, hot, cold, the paradox, the livingness is in the center, so that when we name things, we think because we can name things, they are what they are, only to get into an esoteric thing, and that is only what they seem to be. So is it possible that what she's, I guess all I was wondering is if we could know what we think she's after here.
Yeah, I think we are going to walk through it, and I think a lot of this will be revealed. I think you put your finger on something with consciousness, and that's what's missing in the purely physical view of the dissolution, for instance, of stars. The astronomer doesn't even entertain the fact that these are the physical forms of gods, and that the consciousness, as we call it, is much more determinant in the nature of this dissolution than physical science possibly has a clue. And we will visit all of this. So thanks, Martha, for your input there.
And we have a comment from Anne Veronica.
Yes.
She says it's more than that. By reading, serving, and meditating, we learn to handle the energies that come to us and bring us problems. They come in our life, whatever we do. As long as we do not learn to handle the energies, we are under their power. When we learn to handle them, we can then use them and expand to a better and more inclusive self.
Thank you, Anne Veronica. Yes, it's really the difference between aspiration and discipleship. And that's all we're going to be able to say about that at this point, because it's just necessary to stick with this subject matter. But thanks, that's very clarifying. So let's come back to this paragraph, which starts off well. This statement, there is heat internal and heat external in every atom, the breath of the Father Spirit and the breath or heat of the mother matter, is quoted in the introduction to a treatise on cosmic fire as the defining statement on fire by friction. It came from, quote, manuscript commentaries to which the writer has had access. It's very suggestive. Suggests that there's the existence of an esoteric source for these commentaries, right? Just like this book called The Secret Doctrine is not the true Secret Doctrine, which is unpublishable, you could say. Unfortunately, HPB doesn't reveal just how these esoteric commentaries, quote, give explanations which show that the modern theory of the extinction of the solar fires by loss of heat through radiation is erroneous. And without researching the law of Charles and Winchell's nebular theory, it's difficult to follow HPB's argument refuting 19th century science, but I don't think it's really necessary. Suffice it to say that according to HPB, there is more heat generated by the process of contraction of a star than can be scientifically accounted for. There's a disparity between, the physically observed and the actual amount of heat that's generated. She then goes on to suggest that only the causeless heat or breath, the breath of fire, can account for this missing heat. And, we have to go all the way back to the verse. And this is why I always put the verse, keep the verse visible as we go through the commentaries, right? To give it continual context, because we're talking about the breath of fire of the Father, right? And that's this heat, breath of fire that's being described here. So let's see, where am I? So, though present day astronomical theory is more refined than 19th century astronomy, it's not that different. It still holds that the extinction of a star occurs as a result of the loss of heat through radiation, which HPB states to be erroneous. Could we get a reader for this very untheosophical NASA.gov statement that reflects the current scientific status?
Jim, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I'm not hearing anything there from him. So, Lorraine, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. A star collapses when the fuel is used up and the energy flow from the core of the star stops. Nuclear reactions outside the core cause the dying star to expand outward in the red giant phase before it begins its inevitable collapse. If the star is about the same mass as the sun, it will turn into a white dwarf star. If it is somewhat more massive, it may undergo a supernova explosion and leave behind a neutron star. But if the collapsing core of the star is very great, at least 3 times the mass of the sun, nothing can stop the collapse. The star implodes to form an infinite gravitational warp in space, a black hole.
Thanks, Lorraine. So contrast this with DK's teaching. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Okay. Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. When the will to live vanishes, then the sons of necessity cease from objective manifestation. When the thinker on his own plane withdraws his attention from his little system within the 3 worlds and gathers within himself all his forces, then physical plane existence comes to an end and all returns within the causal consciousness. This demonstrates on the physical plane in the withdrawing from out of the top of the head of the radiant etheric body and the consequent disintegration of the physical. The frameward goes and the dense physical form falls apart.
Okay, and in the previous paragraph or the following paragraph, he says that this applies to a solar logos, the disintegration of a star, a planet, or a human being. So it's a universal law of withdrawal of the will to live of the thinker on his own plane. So, you know, we can read, see back here to the NASA Gov, you know, eventually, you know, we have to reconcile this, but always this will only be physical, right? A physical description. Ultimately, occult science and astronomy will reconcile, but only after astronomers, initially through the development of etheric vision, which is going to change everything, can determine the true causes of the outer effects that demonstrate as the life cycle of a star. These true causes, we're told, are the expansive, fiery breath of the Father, going back to the verse, and the contractive and dissociative breath of the Mother aspect. So, any final thoughts or questions on HPB's commentary on verse 11?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Antonella.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking to the 3 laws of thermodynamics and just checked now online. And by 1860, this scientist called Clausius just stated the 2 of them. So it's before Blavatsky, so probably she refers also to them. But it's paradoxical to me because the thermodynamics in a way says that nothing dies, everything transforms into other. So it's really strange that the lower mind of ordinary science has still believes in the entropy of universe, while these laws assert that nothing can come from nothing. So it seems the stars can die. So if they transform into supernova or whatever, so how to think that the universe is switching, gradually switching off, for example. So it's just a question. And then, no, sorry, you were saying something. No?
No, well, no, I can answer your question. You know, I think that the death experience among humans, when you don't have an understanding of that which lies beyond life, for scientists, they project that into their science, even unknowingly. And so, of course, it's dying because we die and no longer exist from a pure physical point of view, right? So they're not even looking for, nor do they have the nomenclature, the language nomenclature to describe what actually does happen, you know, which is this, well, rebirth through reassociation. You know, Fohat gathers these atomic clusters back together and reforms. But this idea of returning to the bosom of the mother, which is to that homogeneous state, because it's a non-physical reality, it's there's a broken link there. And you know, we can't really look for explanations from science. What we can look for is observation, and they're good at that, you know, on the lowest, on the physical plane, right? As soon as we get etheric vision, all the sciences are going to change, right? As soon as I think that many believe that 11% is the tipping point to where that becomes the new normal, right? When 11% are able to function in a different, in a state of that includes different abilities, right? For instance, etheric vision, and then it tilts, and every facet of scientific observation will change to that next step of causal, right? Which is by no means the kind of causal levels we're looking at in these verses, but it will take us a step towards that. And I think will also open people's, it'll open their minds to further exploration, because, you know, if seeing the energy patterns in the etheric will suggest the sources that lie beyond that, in a way maybe more so than we currently do by just looking at physical reality.
Yeah, and I would like to add also another thing. The fact that 3 days ago, NASA released this information about Betelgeuse, the star in Orion, which changed its form in a way that they can understand. And so every time that they say that, yes, but it's not now, it was many, many years ago, many light years, because the distance tells when this happened. This is not working to me and never worked. So it seems that why, as you use physical instruments to read reality, also the appearance of reality, so you think that the light has a speed, okay? But if this light of Fohat is a no time effect, so the fact that we realize now, we humanity, that Betelgeuse is changing form.
Yeah.
Something that happens now in the consciousness of humanity. Okay, in the in the evolutionary process of consciousness, we can think that there is a time, distance, and whatever. But the fact that we recognize, we humanity, this unexpected change in the form of the star, which is a second order star, decay says, and it influences the heart of disciples. So this tells us other things than it happened many years ago, so it's not regarding us. And so what do you think about this?
Well, yeah, I think I'm not even sure how to pronounce the star's name, Betelgeuse or Betelgeuse.
Yeah, it depends from the language, probably. I don't know in Arabian, the original, which sound is good.
But, you know, if you're looking at it on its own plane and in and of itself, divorced from its influence on the Earth, you can make some statement about it. Actually, probably nobody in our solar system could make any statement about it. But so what we're left with, and in any kind of subjective sense, is its influence on us. And I agree with you that when we register the change, is the time of that influence. You know, it's an interesting question. You know, because you can hold either opinion. You could say, oh no, this happened. You know, I don't know how far Betelgeuse is from the Earth, but it'd be that many years in the past. You know, I think it's quite a ways. So it's a red giant. So I think it's quite a ways. So it'd be, you know, before our modern civilization that this actually occurred. But I tend to think, as you do, that the influence on this solar system, because the influence of these star changes, I think, are systemic wide, you know, registered on every planet, is now. So I agree with you in that.
Yeah, it's 642 years light distant.
Oh, okay.
In this glamorous way of seeing our heaven.
Hi, both of you guys. I would also like to point out that it is it's part of Orion, and of course DK tells us that the constellations themselves, they have meaning. So not only is there the importance of the star Betelgeuse itself, but also the fact that it's the alpha star in Orion, and the importance of the overall constellation of Orion. So,
yeah, it's an important point, BL, and because constellations only exist from
our perspective.
Yeah, from a particular perspective, and you know that perspective holds, you know, many much at a great distance from our solar system. But as you move further out, the constellations change, and my opinion is that they rearrange and become appropriate to other perspectives, meaning from other systems. You know, I mean, DK never talks about this, but it's just a kind of logical extension that Betelgeuse, for instance, would form part of another constellation altogether, you know, if you're looking from another perspective in the galaxy, and could be significant in a whole other way. You know, so the fact that constellations, and that DK says constellations are significant, because, you know, they're not really, it's an illusion. Some of these stars are close, some of them are incredibly far away, but they form a geometric pattern that is relevant to the system.
Right.
And that shows the subjective nature of these constellations. You know, the fact that they can be powerful, and in spite of the fact that they're not inherently cohesive, you know, except for groups like the Pleiades, which are cohesive, right, is significant.
Yeah, I'm remembering the presentation that Walter Pullen did on traveling through the stars, and how when we looked at, and I believe it was the Pleiades, when we looked at the Pleiades from Earth, it looked like we're used to it. And then when he moved to a different point in the sky, those 7 stars that we see in the Pleiades here, formed a straight line like an anticorana. So, and that's right to the point that Anne Veronica has mentioned here. She says, isn't time and space an illusion? What we conceive as very far away in some ways is next to us.
Yeah.
So it is all an illusion, and it is all our own perception of what we're seeing at any given time.
Yes, yes. Yeah, but you have to go all the way up to the level that all manifestation is illusion before you reach this. In other words, linear time, when you cross that barrier, that line in consciousness where articulated space and linear time is transcended, then you transcend the great illusion itself, right? And that is the very nature of a manifested universe, is that it holds that illusion in place, right? So it's illusion at its highest level, right?
May I add just a quick thing?
Sure.
The fact that, for example, the fact that the constellations, we think that humans gave them their form or meaning and whatever, but we know that it's not like that. And that hierarchy, for example, gave the fixed on the higher mental plane, the 12 zodiacal constellations, energies in the mental body of humanity, and so on. So the fact that, for example, we have three chariots in the heaven, which is the great bear, the little bear, and the Pleiades, which are a little chariot, and they have, the 3 of them, this power of pulling, of drawing, it tells us that the appearance is not only illusory, but the symbolic reality of their form tells us what function they have to our eyes, which again is not illusory, because God or divine or soul invented eyes in a way that it's possible to the eyes to recognize the truth behind symbols, also in the physical manifestation. So it's just a matter of how to see, how to listen. So that's, my suggestion.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It did to shift your perspective from any kind of random idea about the names of. It's also true of planets. That these planetary names, it seems like they were just named by somebody along the line, some scientist, right, named Neptune in 1830 or whatever. But you know that this came directly from the hierarchy because the significance, the meaning, the ray quality of Neptune is in direct alignment with its name. So it would be the greatest coincidence possible, and of course we know that's just not the case, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, just for instance, the little and great bear. Well, what's the ray of the animal bear? It's a first ray.
Yeah, first ray, and connected with force.
So there you have it. There's and that takes you to that second level beyond just, somebody looked up there and saw 2 bears. It's not that. Definitely. Thanks for bringing that forward.
Sorry. And again, the sound of bear, which is BR, they are the letters in Sanskrit, which is, we know the ancient language after Sansa, which is exactly the two sounds of to bear with force, to bear again, to bear with force. And the star of Al-Qaeda in Great Bear, for example, is called in Sanskrit Brigu, which means that. So again, the names also in different languages keep the memory of the function. It's just to be not neither skeptical nor fast in conclusion, but just all uniting myths, form of the constellation, position, what decay and other masters say, and infers the mysteries of these wonderful phonetic manifestations. Okay, and now I shut up myself.
Oh, no. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you to comment whenever you like. You have great insight, Antonia.
No. Thank you.
Okay, so
Francis?
yeah,
Britta says, as above, so below.
Yeah.
always, yeah, always. It's it's a very specific teaching, which means that just because it's beyond our capacity to perceive, for instance, in the ring pass not of our particular consciousness, we have another tool, which is that we can examine our micro system and see that in the macro that certain fundamental laws are still intact, right? Or still taking effect, still manifesting. So yes, thank you. Okay.
She adds relating to the comments on Pleiades.
Oh, right. Yeah, much could be said there. It's fascinating, you know what, his name just jumped out of my mind. The presenter, oh, come on. Our brother who did the presentation on the Pleiades.
Walter.
Walter, thank you. Yeah, with his software, he's literally able to reposition, you know, based on distances and look at any body of stars from a different perspective. Can you imagine being on a system or in a system where the Pleiades forms a straight line? It would be the type of energy and the potency of that energy would be quite different, I would think. So, any other comments?
That's all I see for now.
Okay, then let's take a closer look at the verse itself. I'm going to reread it.
Oops.
Go ahead.
I spoke too soon. Britta's got her hand up.
Go ahead, Britta.
Yeah, well, you just said about the Pleiades and the rising up of the stars in one line.
Yes.
I don't recall exactly, but I think that DK says in Esoteric Healing that the chakras of the human body is relating, of course, to one particular star, Pleiades, as well as in the other constellations of the Great Bear. I'm not sure, but that's just a thought that came to me.
Yeah, I think it's not the personal centers. I think it's the centers of humanity itself.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also the source of certain ray energies, which are steps down through the planets and come to us that way.
Well, the chakras of the human body is related to several planets and rays.
Well, yes.
Yes, And
Yes.
it may be so also in the Pleiades and in other stars constellations, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. It's a deep study. Nicholas Nielsen has done a lot of work in this area. His presentations are fascinating. He's sort of specializes in the energy of the constellations and individual stars.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So let's take a closer look at verse 11. I'm going to reread it so we get oriented towards it. It, the web, expands when the breath of fire, the Father, is upon it. It contracts when the breath of the Mother, the root of matter, touches it. Then the sons, the elements with their respective powers or intelligences, dissociate and scatter to return into their mother's bosom at the end of the great day and re-become one with her. When it, the web, is cooling, it becomes radiant. Its sons expand and contract through their own selves and hearts. They embrace infinitude. It's quite a verse. Okay, first we have it, the web, expands when the breath of fire, the Father, is upon it. The web, which is all manifestation, outbreathed by Svabhavat, that's that father-mother aspect of deity, expands through the fiery agency of Fohat, who, quote, hardens the atoms, thus forming distinct units from out of the homogeneous Mula Prakriti. This process is described in that other stanza 3 from the Stanzas of Dzyan, the one that appears in a treatise on cosmic fire. Here's an excerpt. Could we get a reader for this? It's actually got one statement from, a couple of statements from stanza 5 as well that are related.
Britta, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. 7 times the revolution and 7 times great the heat. More solid grew the formless mass, and deeper sank the stone. To the heart of inmost fire the sacred stone went down. This time the work was better done, and the product more perfected. The timeless ones entered into time. The watchers began their task, and lo, the work proceeds.
Thank you, Britta. Any thoughts or questions? Detailed analysis? So the sacred stone is the life principle, the point in the center of the ring past knot of every unit of consciousness. The purpose of the evolutional cycle is to anchor this life principle on progressively more dense subplanes all the way down to the, quote, heart of inmost fire, which is the fire inherent in matter itself. Okay, up next, it contracts when the breath of the Mother, the root of matter, touches it. This contraction, which characterizes the evolutionary cycle, reverses the initial work of Fohat by withdrawing the life principle from the lower planes onto the higher. This soul-activated radioactive process results in an aggregation of ever larger groups of units of consciousness. If anybody has any thoughts or questions as we go through, just don't be shy. So next, then the sons, the elements with their respective powers or intelligences, dissociate and scatter to return to their mother's bosom at the end of the great day and re-become one with her. That's a day of Brahma. These sons or elements are described in the second half of verse 7. The one is 4, and 4 takes to itself 3, and the union produces the Sapta, in whom are the 7, which become the Tridasha, or the hosts and the multitude. These initial four are further described in the commentary on verse 9. We've done all this, but it's been a while. The four primal natures of the first Dzyan Chohans are the so-called, for want of better terms, Akashic, ethereal, watery, and fiery, answering in the terminology or practical occultism to scientific definitions of gases, which, to convey a clear idea to both occultists and laymen, must be defined as parahydrogenic, paraoxygenic, oxyhydrogenic, and ozonic, or perhaps nitrozonic. We're not in the habit of associating elements like parahydrogen with the consciousness of a primordial Adi Buddha, but this seems to be what HPB is suggesting. It's kind of cool, actually. At any rate, even these highest elements, quote, dissociate and scatter to re-become one with Mula Prakriti, the great mother, the ocean of life, at the end of the evolutionary cycle. Next we have, when the web is cooling, it becomes radiant. Its suns expand and contract through their own selves and hearts. This tells us that the involutional and evolutional cycles are initiated and carried out by each unit of consciousness, quote, through their own selves or monadic essences and hearts. This last possibly because the life thread is anchored in the heart. For me, the statement suggests the aligning of self-will with the will of Father, Mother, Svabhavat, who, you know, in the evolutional cycle is manifesting the will to be. The image of a flock of starlings moving as one comes to mind, except we'll be firebirds. Okay, finally we have they embrace infinitude. In this embrace, they, meaning all creation, move from being what Michael Robbins calls an infinitesimal into the realm of beingness, the absolute. Infinitude lies beyond and stands in a causal relationship to sequential time. We were just talking about that. This embrace is the final release of spirit from all conditioning form. The theosophical day be with us. Stanza 6 from a treatise on cosmic fire beautifully describes the process of relief from the hold of the form aspect that each imprisoned monad must and will undergo. Can we get a reader for this stanza, please?
Yes. You actually have a long question, and then Martha had her hand up, but let me go to Anne Veronica and ask her to read it, and then I'll read her question, okay?
Sounds fine.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Within the cabin, dark, the fourfold one groped for expansion and for further light. No light above, and all around the gloom enveloped. Pitchy the darkness that surrounded it. To the innermost center of the heart, throbbing without the warming light, crept in the icy cold of uttermost darkness. Above the cabin, dark shone all the light of day, yet the fourfold one saw it not, nor did the light pervade. The rending of the cabin precedes the light of day. Great then must be the shattering. No help is found within the cave, nor any hidden light. Around the fourfold one layeth the vault of stone. Beneath him manaketh the root of blackness, of utter denseness. Beside him and above, naught but the same is seen. The threefold watches know and see. The fourfold is now ready. The work of denseness is completed, the vehicle prepared. Soundeth the trump of shattering, blinding the power of the oncoming flame. The mystic earthquake rocks the cavern, the burning flames disintegrate the Maya, and lo, the work is done. Gone is the gloom and the blackness, rent is the cavern's roof, the light of life shines in, the warmth inspires. The Lord on-looking see the work commence, the fourfold one becomes the seven, the chant of those who flame rises to all creation, the moment of achievement is attained. Proceedeth the work anew, creation moveth on its way, while waxeth the light within the cavern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, she had a question, and it was a little earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt you when you were in the middle of your discussion. Anyway, it says, I have a problem. I can't understand this. Everything comes from the one eternal, boundless all. Why is there spirit and matter? Why internal and external fires? It seems matter is something less and different than the spirit. I'm definitely missing something. The only thing I can think about all of this is that as the boundless all comes down, it doesn't express itself in the beginning perfectly. It's the only way I can understand this difference, matter and spirit.
Well, it's one of the big questions, right? It's which is why, the big why, capital W-H-Y. Why does manifestation happen? And the answer that DK gives is to advance the consciousness of, manifestation affords the opportunity for the advancement of consciousness of each unit, right? So through participation in a larger body of consciousness, one is able to expand until the point to where, well, we could go back. I think it's a number of slides, but if you remember in the TCF where there's this intense pressure that it creates radiation and allows a unit of consciousness to break beyond the ring path. It's actually a radioactive state. To then re-aggregate into a larger unit, right? And manifestation affords that possibility. And it's the indwelling spirit, the infusion of spirit in matter that makes this possible. Otherwise, matter would be completely static and would not change at all. In fact, there is no matter that is not touched by spirit. And in manifestation, there is no spirit that is without form. There is only spirit-infused matter during manifestation. I hope that helps. If anybody, I see a hand.
Yes, Martha has her hand up. But let me just ask, and Veronica, does that answer your question?
Yes, I still have the problem that matter is just as divine as the spirit. It came from the one unboundless all. So why this differentiation? I can understand that it gives us an opportunity to evolve, but the thing I'm thinking, isn't matter as divine as spirit? Why does it seem so slow, seems less? It can't be without spirit. It's like, is the chicken first or the egg? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank
you anyway.
And I wouldn't presume to tell you which came first. But matter. What does HPB say? Spirit is matter at the highest level, and no, gosh, I thought I had the quote on my tongue, but I don't. But it's a statement that tells us that both are one. Scott, does that quote jump into your mind? You know which one I'm trying to think of.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Matter is spirit is spirit at its lowest manifestation, something like that.
Yes, spirit is the lowest form of matter. Matter, the highest form of spirit. Only the reverse. Just reverse my words. I said it exactly.
Yeah, something to that effect. But I'm
Yeah.
not quite either. But
It's
that's just
that basically points to the illusory quality of the duality, right? It's the, you could say it's the fundamental duality, and that all duality is illusion, right? So in the seeing of them as being separate is the very central point of all illusion, right? Because you could say all other illusions come out of that basic duality of spirit and form, or spirit and matter, right? It's, after all, it's father-mother, right? And father-mother is a unified being, svabhava. In fact, that's what we've been studying, right? And issuing forth from svabhavat is this duality, right? You know, if you go back to, let's see if we can get back there. Yeah, number 10, we'll just read it here because I don't want to jump a zillion slides back, but father, mother spin a web whose upper end is fastened to spirit, the light of the one darkness, and the lower one to its shadowy end, matter. And this web is the universe, spun out of the two substances made in one, which is svabhava, or father, mother. So, and that's actually even more eloquent than HPB's words, but it's very similar to what HPB says about spirit and matter's connection. I'm still trying to recall it. But okay.
Spirit is the lowest, is the highest form of matter. Matter is the lowest form of spirit.
Yeah, but there's something. Yeah, that's correct. But there's something else in the way she says is that you know, the yin yang symbol. That's the perfect illustration of the yin yang symbols. If everybody can visualize that, you know, you have the two teardrop shapes that together form a circle, right? One black, one white. But in addition to that, you have this dot of the opposite color in the middle of the of each opposite. There's a white dot in the black teardrop, and a black dot in the middle of the white, and that is it's so interesting that at the heart of matter, you have spirit, right, or that white dot or black dot. And at the heart of spirit, you have the will to be. This is in manifestation, because this is only true in the realm of duality, right? It is the penultimate dual sign.
They're inseparable then. That would be an illustration of their inseparability. It occurred to me that maybe, and Veronica, for me, I think, clarify this to make sure I've got it right, Francis, is that matter is not always the equivalent of form. That matter and spirit is their energetic realities that operate within the Hermetic principle of cycles, that and of polarity, and that what I think, I'm a psychologist. I'm not a scientist or astrologer, but what it seems to me is that there is the the deity, or the original source of all that created, is required to manifest in order to complete itself, and that in completing itself, there's an interrelationship that boggles your mind, because of course we're not talking about equality in species, but the fact that the consciousness has the capacity to grasp that, we call it Godhead's need to express itself. If it doesn't express itself, it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
And
and existence itself is a function of substance,
so there's no inequality between matter, because matter is utterly infinite along with spirit. It's when we translate it down to our humanity, because we acknowledge our own requirement for spirit in order to become self-realized, we tend to think of it as higher. But when we're talking about the universe or the cosmology, it is so interpenetrated and interrelated. There can be no inequality. But clarify if I've got it right. I'm thinking on the level of psychology.
Well, we have an evolutionary bias, right? We're trying to re-become one with the mother, right? It's to return to the mother's bosom. That's the cycle we're in. We're in an evolutionary cycle, and because of that, we have a negative bias to matter, right? But on an evolutional cycle, notice that it's the breath of the Father, which is spirit, that allows for the evolutional cycle, that plunges the philosophical, the stone, the fiery stone, that point of consciousness, that plunges that into the realm of matter, right? It's the breath of the Father that initiates the evolutional cycle. If you look here at this verse 11, which is on the screen, the normal idea that a return to the mother would be a return to the form aspect is just reverse, because it's the influence or the breath of the Father who, through Fohat, creates diversity, right? And then it's through the radiant, well, they just call it the breath of the mother, there's a dissociation that occurs. So it's interesting how you have that reversal. When the web is cooling, it becomes radiant. And that cooling aspect is the influence of the Great Mother. So, yeah, it's
okay.
It's one of the biggest of all questions, right? And if you are looking at the purpose of deity, why? What's the purpose? Well, we can be glib about that. Say, well, what I said basically, which is that each involutional and evolutional cycle allows the lesser ones, the little ones, to advance, right? But Michael makes a case for the fact that we have these systemic pralayas, which are these times of rest, where everything is held in situ. It's not actually, it's kind of like permanent atoms. It's not actually made completely homogeneous. And then it re-begins in the next cycle of manifestation. But then there is this super cosmic pralaic time when all creation becomes homogeneous. And Michael's belief on this, Michael Robbins is who I'm referencing here, is that there is no progress. This is not, following that, it's not progressive. It's simply pure beingness. There is no agenda. There is no progression that has pralaya at the center of it. In other words, you have an active period, then you have a pralaya, and then you have another active period that takes you further. This supracosmic pralaya is a complete return to homogeneity. And so then from that perspective, if you try to formulate a purpose for manifestation, well, it becomes a real head scratcher, right? Okay, you had something?
Francis?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a hand up and a couple more comments here. And Veronica says that Michael says that form is geometrically done, that formed, it is much more than matter.
Well, sure. Yeah, and you also have substance and geometry rules. You know, the original giver of the aspects of the form world is called the great architect, right? He creates these blueprints by which these Davic lords through the elemental kingdoms bring into form, literally through their own substance. So it's not just some kind of random material thing. It's created with real purpose from on high. Yeah, go ahead. Anyone else?
And then she also, yeah, we still have a hand up, but she also went on to say, I think you can't put a beginning on a circle. It doesn't have a beginning and an end.
No, you can't. You know, you can even on a cycle, which is a kind of spiral-like circle, right? Where do you start? Well, look at an Ouroboros with its head in its mouth. Now, did I say head in its mouth? Tail in its mouth. You know, the initiating and ending are purposely overlapped to show the continuity. And so what happens is pralaya marks a point of greatest, what you could call tenuity or attenuation of the physical. But it, you know, for instance, in planetary pralayas, there's at least hypothesis that there's formless planet cycles that complete the group of 7 manifesting planets, right? So that it's really 10, and some say even 12, you know, to complete the cycle, right? But that, and in that case, you travel through what would be called a planetary pralaya on these formless levels, and then re-enter again at the first on the next cycle. Any other thoughts?
Yes, you got a couple of hands. Let's go to George first. George, you're self-muted.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much for your what you do. I was just listening to you about saying about the chicken and the egg, which came first, and you said you wouldn't like to say. Well, one of the things that came to mind.
Yes.
One of the things that comes to mind is we mentioned the dinosaur that come first, which now we say is the birds of the air. In evolution, that's what I came across.
I'm missing one part of your idea here. You said a word that I didn't understand. You said the dinosaur, and then what did you say?
I said the dinosaur in evolution became the birds of the air.
The what of the what?
Well, we were talking about the chicken or the egg. Which come first?
Right. Yeah.
Well, in the planetary term, not in the universal term, but in the planetary term, we say that the dinosaur, between the chicken and the egg, that came before the chicken, the dinosaur. which now in evolution is the birds of the air.
Mm.
The birds.
Yeah, the birds of the air, right? Right. Yeah, isn't that? Yeah, that's very fascinating that they are the source of the birds of the air. And this is, you know, as mystical as that is, it's purely physical science, right? When the real causal levels would be the response of this germ of being that was at one time a dinosaur, responding to a new cycle, and the energies of that new cycle to manifest as the birds of the air, you know. And so you have this, the real egg, you know, is on causal levels always, right? And who lays that egg? Well, you could say the great architect. You know, it's a fabulous conundrum on a purely physical plane, because of course it can't be the egg, because there has to be something to lay that egg, right? And it can't be that something because it had to come from an egg, and that takes you, and it's like of course like a Zen koan, and the answer to it, you must move into more causal levels. But thanks for bringing that forth.
Yeah, well, I just felt when you mentioned about, when you said that you wouldn't want to answer the question, what came first, would be the chicken or the egg. I just wanted to answer it with what I had come across. Oh, goodness. Many decades ago, I came across that it was the dinosaur, but we are the dinosaur as well, because we know in the teachings of the Secret Doctrine that the animal form was part of a pack soul, and in evolution everything moves on into the etheric body, into the being that we are today in our human form. So everything moves on, even we move. We only recognize and take the experience and what we are, and we have to hand it over in the end, all our experience, to the golden light. So I just wanted to answer that. The other thing that you mentioned about Jonathan, I did send a message saying that not to be the victim. One of the things about the lower self and the higher self is recognizing the emotions between that and the compassion. How to recognize the higher self. I think St. Paul put it a better way when he said, yeah, I live and move and have my being in a being.
Yeah, it's becoming conscious, gradually more conscious of the fact of that statement, you know, to live and move and have your being in your soul and monad, which is also a spark from the planetary logos, right? So, but to, you know, back to the dinosaur, if you think of an Ouroboros, which is, you know, some of them are drawn like dinosaurs, you know, which is the dinosaur the tail? It's the dinosaur the head. It's one recognizable point on a continuous spiral of existence. And, you know, even if it just appeared on the physical plane, it would still be the outer manifestation of a long series of involutional processes. So you always have to include the unseen sources in this type of discussion.
Yeah, well, I do think deep about this. I've spent over 50 years studying the understanding behind it, but I still see it as that's what we were as part of a pack soul when we're in the animal kingdom. The human kingdom has an individuality as a soul with free will. So I see it in a different way, but I still, even today, over 50 years, I still battle with it in my comprehension. I just wanted to say, obviously, because you said you wouldn't say about what came first, about the chicken or the egg, I just wanted to say the dinosaur, because it was an egg, but obviously in the Secret Doctrine, it speaks about the universe and the golden egg in the beginning.
Yeah, the Hiranyagarbha, right? Yeah.
Oh, you put the words beautiful. Yes, I've heard you say that before. I try and remember words like that, but I'm not very good with words. But that's very beautiful. Yes, thank you.
Yes, well, thank you. That takes us all the way back to the first stanzas of this. I mean, the first verses of this stanza. You know, we could, if we were to read in the gray there, we see that darkness radiates light, and light drops one solitary ray into the mother deep. If you're looking for a beginning, that's in terms of externalizing that one solitariness of that ray, you could say is the first nature of the first quality of of separativeness, right? The ray shoots through the virgin egg, which is the Hiranyagarbha. The ray causes the eternal egg to thrill, and still we're completely at causal levels. I'm looking at number 3 here, and drop the non-eternal germ. And right there, you have a shift into the manifested world. And then that further condenses into the world egg, right? And, we could go back 10 webinars and look at this again, because it's never, quote, solved or, quote, learned. It's just considered, right? So thank you, George. Appreciate your input.
Francis. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Francis.
Okay, and we have several more.
Yeah, in part of this discussion, perhaps we can go back to the proem of the Secret Doctrine on page 15, where it reads, "Spirit, or consciousness, and matter are, however, to be regarded not as independent realities, but as the two facets or aspects of the absolute, Parabrahm, which constitute the basis of conditioned being, whether subjective or objective."
Right. Yes, indeed. It's well said. Yep. Read that very first sentence again. Very first phrase.
Spirit, or consciousness, and matter are, however, to be regarded not as independent realities.
That's the point right there. They're not independent realities. That's the illusion, right? Right, but two facets of the same reality, and that reality being manifestation, whether abstract or corporeal, right? So, yeah, thank you. That was very timely, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, and we have several more hands up. Scott's hand's up, but let's go to Vicki first. Her hand's been up for quite a while. Go ahead, Vicki, and ask your question, please.
Oh.
There you go.
Yeah, you mentioned you were talking about substance and matter. And I can recall in DK trying to define that someplace in the Ellis Bailey works. And I didn't understand it when I read it, and I don't understand it now. And I'm not certain if you use those two terms interchangeably or meant to distinguish between them.
Well, first of all, you can divide it into two aspects, which can be described as fire and water, right? And the watery realm is the realm of substance/matter. Then when you get into a further definition, the matter, as I understand it, is that part of the form aspect that is used in order to follow the imprint of the substantive realm. So, for instance, the etheric would be considered substantive in that it's the actual and true source of the material outer manifestation. Now, I'm happy to be corrected on that if one of you knows for sure on this, but that's my recollection.
I'm still not quite certain. So when we talk about Mula Prakriti, am I saying that right?
Yeah. Right.
Which is primordial substance. Is that what GK means with substance? And does he mean that matter is the four elements such as we know them, air, earth, fire, and water? Is that the distinction? I'm still confused, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't feel qualified to really answer your question. My understanding is that substance tends to be used as the causal aspect of the outer material form. So Mula Prakriti would be the completely homogeneous, is that right? Homogeneous, yeah. Homogeneous. No, it's homogeneous. There's those two words mean slightly different things. Homogeneous, that's the correct word. In other words, there's absolutely no difference. It's the reservoir of what will become the substantive world. That is to say, it will be articulated. But, where in the evolutional descent substance becomes matter, I can't really answer that question.
Okay, well,
but
that was very helpful.
I will
look. That was very helpful.
I will look into it. It's something I would like to clear up for myself too. Just do a massive word search through all DK and hopefully we can come up with and through HPB and see if we can come up with some clarification. Anybody out there? I know we've got some occultists among us. Has some thoughts on this, please go ahead and answer this.
Okay, speaking of occultists, Scott's got his hand up and he has had for a while. So go ahead, please, Scott. And then I have a couple of comments to read too.
Okay, I have no answer to your question. I'm going further back upstream to simply the question about what the quote was by Blavatsky. So it's not in the same realm you are now. But the quote is, matter is spirit at its lowest level, and spirit is matter at its highest level.
That's simple. Okay, that's simple. Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, I know nothing.
No. Well, there's something in knowing that,
Every day.
Yeah, I thought that was what Martha told us.
I think it was.
Yeah, she did. She did. But to have the actual quote, yeah. But I thought there was some other quality to it, but that's it. That's it. And it basically says it, that there are two aspects of the same, two facets of the same reality. Thank you, Scott. And you had something else.
Jonathan has a couple of comments here. He says, to give up the light of the past to ignite the light of the future. Betelgeuse looks like it wants to transfer its energy to Bellatrix. And then through the bow, It will be released to the next generation of stars to empower the future birth. And then he goes on to say, in archery, you have to focus the eye dominance to hit its target.
Well, that's very beautifully said. Thank you, Jonathan. Any more raised hands, comments? Are we there?
That's all I see right now. I think I caught everything.
Perfect timing. It's as though we choreographed it. Our time is out, and we're just finished with They Embrace Infinitude on number 11, verse 11. So see if there's anything else here. Yeah, we did cover stanza 6, and we're back to verse 11. Yep, we're there. Okay, folks, that's it for today. Thanks very, very much for your intense participation. I much enjoy it. It's so much better than me just, delivering words from this end. It's really great. And thanks for your continuous participation in this webinar series. We're moving right along. Now we're going into the fourth stanza next week. So good. And yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say the next one is going to be the 15th of March.
Good.
There's time zone changes in that, and so we will be changing it to 7 p.m. GMT, but for most of us, it's going to be a wash because we will have gone through our time zone change. And also, the next...
You mean it'll be at the same time?
No, the time change for us in America is the 8th of March. I think it's a week or two later in Europe, but
I see.
It's not that particular.
So it'll be an hour later. If we go back onto daylight savings time, then in the US, for instance, it'll be an hour later. You'll have to check locally. When you get
it'll be 7 p.m. GMT, but like I said, it's going to be a wash for us here in the States local time.
Okay.
Because we go from being 5 hours, well, I'm 5 hours different, and I'll go to 4 hours different. So it's 1 hour earlier. Anyway, so it'll basically be the same time that we're used to right now. The adjustment in daylight savings time is canceled out by the change in the time of the webinar. So for those of us here in the States, and for those who participate in Arizona. Unless you live in Arizona and they don't change their time. For those who participate in the Secret Teaching of All Ages, that next one is going to be 1 March at 8 p.m. GMT because it's prior to the change in time zone. So
when in doubt, just type the GMT time into Google and ask for your local time translation, and we'll get it in 2 seconds.
If you, when you register and go to webinar, you usually can register for your own time zone, and then it does the math for you. That's the way I do it.
Even better, right? Okay. So I hope to see you all on the 1st. We're having a blast in this Secret Teachings of All Ages. This coming one will be the last session on the Druids, and then we'll be moving into a study of Mithras, and which is fascinating. Persian god. Give me that old time religion. Let's dance with Zarathustra like we used to. So that's the source of that. And then back here with SD on the 15th. Okay, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.